Welcome to our 3-Minute Therapy podcast. Uh, I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I'm a clinical psychologist and author. I'm here with my co-host, Mick Berry, and we do our podcasts weekly. And REBT is Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. It was devised by Albert Ellis in the 1950s, who was a genius in the psychology and psychotherapy movement. And he changed things from the earlier psychoanalytic related therapy, where Freud said, look at your childhood and talk about your childhood. Unfortunately, some therapists still do that. But what we show you is that it's not your childhood or past events that causes your emotional and behavioral problems, but rather it's your thinking about current or past events that causes your anxiety, depression, anger, resentment, or addictions. So the thing for you to do, if you have any of these problems, is to identify your irrational thinking, your demands, your musts and shoulds, and then question, challenge, and contradict them. And the main musts and shoulds people have are a demand on oneself. I must do well and get approval, and if I don't, I'm no good, which leads to anxiety, hurt, guilt, and others. A demand on others. Others must treat me well, kindly, fairly, and considerately. And if they don't, they're no good. And that causes anger, resentment, and hostility. And then a demand on the impersonal conditions of one's life, not on oneself or others, but rather on your conditions, the situations you find yourself in, the discomfort and hassles that you have. And that takes the form of my life must be fair, easy, and hassle-free. And if it's not, then my life is horrible. And that leads to addictions, or sometimes even worse, suicide. So what we do in these podcasts is we identify different problems people have, emotional and behavioral problems, and identify the musts and shoulds that go along with it, and then show you how you can change that. Mick, do you want to add anything to the introduction?
I think that covers it.
Okay, so today we were going to discuss REBT and was it forgiveness, Mick?
Yeah.
REBT and forgiveness. So, so forgiveness means normally it's a two-step process. First, it means creating demands, demanding things of others. Someone criticizes you unfairly or wrongs you, and you have a must. They must not do that. They must not treat me that way. And then forgiveness means giving up those demands. It doesn't mean excusing or condoning the poor treatment, but it just means you don't make yourself angry about it. And then once you're not angry about it, then you can try to speak to the person and do something about it if that's possible. Some other demands and irrational beliefs related to forgiveness is condemning someone. You're a rotten person because you wronged me. Also, getting over can't stand it-itis. I can't stand this poor treatment, and showing yourself you can stand what you don't like, you're standing it. And also that it's not awful, terrible, or horrible if you've been treated poorly. It's unfortunate, unpleasant, uncomfortable, but not the end of the world. So that's the skeleton of forgiveness. And Mick, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I think you left out a very important part of that, which is forgiving yourself. You're talking about forgiving other people. Did you mention forgiving yourself? I didn't catch that.
No, I didn't. That's a good point. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, as we know, one of the biggest problems people have is putting themselves down and not accepting themselves. So when it comes to forgiveness, a lot of what is really useful and vital if you're going to be mentally healthy is to forgive yourself. And this works the same way as forgiving other people, although it's a little more convenient to forgive yourself because you can accept your own forgiveness of yourself. If you're forgiving somebody else, they might not accept you and you don't have control over how they're going to react to that. But if you forgive yourself, you will feel happier and you don't have a second party to contend with. But forgiving yourself involves recognizing that you yourself are a fallible human being and you can live with yourself being a fallible human being while you want to not make mistakes and not fail and you want to succeed, accepting that even if you do fail, even if you do make mistakes, you can still accept yourself unconditionally. And this is achieved by practicing and practicing and practicing, forgiving ourselves even if we make mistakes. And that includes forgiving ourselves for not forgiving ourselves, forgiving ourselves for not cultivating the ability to accept ourselves. I can accept myself as somebody who has difficulty accepting himself. And when I do that, I then make it easier for me to work on accepting myself and eventually, if not sooner, be able to accept myself with making mistakes and accept myself with the difficulty of accepting myself.
Yeah, or another way to put it is forgive myself for not forgiving myself. So just as someone else may not accept your forgiveness, you may not also. So it's good to work on that also, Mick.
Yeah, and while you do forget, I forgive myself for not forgiving myself. I want to strive to forgive myself. So even though I forgive myself for not forgiving myself, I don't settle for not forgiving myself. I still work on it. And I would say invariably, if somebody does work on this, they will improve and they will acquire the ability to unconditionally accept themselves and then also unconditionally accept other people. There are extreme situations. If I'm in a domestic situation where I'm passionately involved with somebody else, but they're being physically abusive to me, well, okay, I can accept that they have this tendency to do this while not accepting the behavior, and I can decide to move out and do what it takes to get out of there so I'm protecting myself. So accepting doesn't mean accepting the behavior, it means accepting that they have the capacity to do this and not falling into the irrational, erroneous belief that they absolutely must not behave this way. Unfortunately, they have the freedom to behave this way, and equipped with that knowledge, I will be better prepared to attend to what I need to do to take care of myself, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, once you forgive another person, meaning you don't condemn them, then you have a choice. You can try to speak with them and see if and express your discomfort and displeasure with their behavior, or you could end the relationship. So that gives you more freedom. Also, in forgiving others and forgiving yourself, the bottom line is you and others, everyone, is at worst just imperfect humans who act imperfectly, never rotten or bad people. Their behavior could be bad or your behavior could be bad, but don't rate your total self or the total self of others based on the rating of your behavior. Mick?
And I wanted to say there's a third aspect, of course, of forgiving the world, even though it depends on what your philosophy or thoughts are behind the world, but it's often, I myself can get angry at a chair if the chair isn't cooperating, but that doesn't do me any good. And so I forgive the chair for not cooperating to do what I would like it to do. And I have talked to some religious people who have said that they found it was necessary for them to forgive God for creating a world that they didn't like many aspects of. So there is the aspect of us forgiving the world, or if you believe in God, to forgive God. So there is that also.
Yeah, and in terms of forgiving the world or life, uh, not forgiving the world or life comes from my life must be easy and spare me hassles. So you have hassles and problems in your life, and then you have a must about that. My life must not be this way. It must be easy. So if you forgive life, it means you convince yourself the must is false, although I prefer not to have one hassle after another, or one discomfort after another. There's no reason it must be otherwise. Mick?
Yeah, and what Albert Ellis prescribes, and other people that, other therapists that follow his advice, put yourself in the difficult situation and practice not telling yourself this must be otherwise. I was talking to a therapist and he had a client that always got upset in traffic. And so his homework assignment was to drive in traffic and work on not getting upset that there was traffic. And by exposing himself and to work on his irrational thoughts, the situation, as we know, does not create the irrational thoughts. But if we are in the habit of having irrational thoughts in a situation, then we can put ourselves in that situation to expose ourselves to the irrational thoughts that we create. Would you say that it is accurate that if we have habitual thoughts in a situation, though the situation isn't causing our thoughts, if we get in that situation, it's likely that we will have those thoughts if we haven't worked on changing them?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. And in my book, 3 Minute Therapy, I discuss 3 minute imagery, where in some cases, it's very difficult to put yourself in a situation. For example, if you have a fear of flying, it would be good to fly as much as possible, but that's usually impractical. But what you can do is use 3 minute imagery and picture yourself in some of those difficult situations that you refer to, Mick. And while picturing yourself in those situations, practice identifying your musts in the fear, for example, fear of flying, and then question, challenge, and contradict those musts while picturing yourself getting ready to board a plane. Mick?
Yeah, and I wanted to say I do think the rational motive imagery is very useful. However, I've personally found that nothing substitutes for the brass tacks of actually being in a situation. So that the imagery is good practice, but then when you can get in the situation, to put yourself in that situation. One of the problems I've had is getting rejected by women. Now it's easy to get rejected by women. I could just walk down the street and approach a woman and I'll probably get rejected. However, it's difficult to find a situation where I'm really interested in a woman and getting rejected by the woman. And so I have found that when I've been in a situation where I'm involved with a woman and I don't know if it's going to work out, I've looked on it as a chance to practice, really practice being able to be rational with the possibility of getting rejected. And so far, I'm batting 1,000 because I've managed to get rejected. So I'm incredibly successful at it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Great. I didn't have anything else to add to this. Mick, do you have any final words?
Just the word forgiveness, I think it's a little misleading because really what we're talking about is unconditional self acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, unconditional life acceptance. And forgiveness, I think, has, well, vague connotations. What does it really mean? I'm looking at the definition here, and it says the intentional act of letting go of resentment, anger, or the desire for vengeance towards someone who has wronged or hurt you. But we, of course, included towards ourselves and towards the world. The intentional act of letting go of resentment, anger, or the desire for vengeance. I'm not sure I'd define forgiveness that way, but and I don't even like to think of the word forgiveness that much. I just would rather think of unconditional self acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance, because that's really what we're talking about, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't condemn yourself, others, or life in the first place, then there's nothing to forgive in the second place. So, so that would be the best place, the best goal to work toward.
And there is the situation where people are arrested for something and on trial, and so there is forgiveness in a particular crime where you've got actual ramifications of not being forgiven. But would you say that's true? But it might be a little bit different.
Yeah,
I'm just saying there's a definite physical repercussion from being forgiven or not being forgiven.
yeah, that's more of a legal aspect to it.
I'm going to, and I wanted to read a Shakespeare quote, very famous speech, though it's talking about the quality of mercy, which I think ties into forgiveness. Would you agree?
Well, what? Oh, yeah, mercy.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the speech. The quality of mercy is, and I think it's really good to note that what Shakespeare does is he talks about the attributes of forgiveness here and what somebody gets by forgiving. You get the freedom of anxiety and freedom of hatred and anger. And so, anyway, here we go. The quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show like as God's when mercy seasons justice. So there you go.
Okay. So Rash, so maybe it was Shakespeare who identified REBT.
Well, that would be a good topic. The thing is, a very, I would call him a genius. How can you argue with that? And he had great insight into the human condition. And part of that is anxiety and anger and fear and loathing and everything else. He recognized human fallibility. And I think he also recognized how to avoid human fallibility. He didn't spell it out as clearly as Albert Ellis, but it's all in there.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, thanks, Mick, for your great participation here. And I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I have a website, 3minutetherapy.com. Thank you, Chris Rossini, our tech engineer. Comment below if you have thoughts about our discussion or would like to volunteer. Give us a like and a thumbs up. And stay on and subscribe to our podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life and forgiveness. I wanted to throw in one thing I'm seeing in the first line here. The quality of mercy is not strained. That shows that it's exempt from anxiety.